I found my father trying to bury something in the backyard at 3 in the morning. The shovel scraped against frozen earth as Robert dug frantically, still wearing his pajamas, dirt smearing across the faded flannel. Emma had driven 2 hours after the care nurse called, panic making her hands shake on the wheel. Now she stood in the doorway, watching her father, the man who taught her to ride a bike, who never missed a single school play, digging a hole like he was trying to escape something. "Dad, what are you doing?" Robert looked up, his eyes unfocused. "Sarah needs her doll. For the funeral. I forgot to bury it with her." Emma's blood went cold. Sarah. The sister she never knew, dead 30 years before Emma was born. "Dad, come inside. Please." He dropped the shovel and stared at his dirty hands like they belonged to someone else. "Who are you?" Those 3 words shattered something in Emma's chest. She guided him inside, cleaned his hands, tucked him into bed like he was the child. The dementia had been creeping in for months, forgotten appointments, repeated stories, her mother's name on his lips even though she'd been gone 5 years. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt like losing him in real time. The next morning, Emma surveyed the damage in the backyard. The hole was pathetic, barely 6 inches deep. But as she moved to fill it, sunlight caught something in the old oak tree. Paper. Hundreds of pieces of paper, tied to branches with faded ribbons and fraying string, fluttering like desperate prayers. Emma pulled one down. The handwriting was her father's, younger and steadier. "Take Margaret to Paris, 1987. Another, learn to play the piano for Sarah, 1992. Another, call Michael back, 2003. Her hands moved faster, pulling note after note. Finish the treehouse, 1995. Tell Mom I was sorry, 2010. Be the father Emma deserves, 2015. Hundreds of them. Hundreds of broken promises hanging from branches like ornaments of failure. She found Robert in the kitchen, lucid again, staring at his coffee. Emma spread the notes across the table between them. His face crumpled. "I hung them there so I wouldn't forget," he whispered. "So I'd see them every day and finally do them. But I never did. I just kept hanging more." "Dad, who's Margaret? Who's Michael?" Robert's eyes filled with tears. "I don't remember. I can't, the names are there but the faces are gone. Everything's going." His voice broke. "I'm losing myself, Emma. I'm losing everyone I ever loved, everyone I ever failed." Emma reached across and gripped his trembling hands. A decision crystallized, sharp and clear. "Then I'll complete them for you. Every single one. You can't fix my mistakes. Maybe not. But I can try." The first promise led Emma to a nursing home 3 towns over. Margaret Chen, 74, sat by a window doing a crossword puzzle. When Emma introduced herself as Robert's daughter, Margaret's pen froze mid-word. Bobby had a daughter. Her voice carried decades of wonder and hurt. Emma showed her the note. Margaret laughed, but it came out wet with tears. "He promised me Paris when I got better. I had breast cancer in 1987. He visited every day, brought me magazines about France, told me we'd go together when I was healthy." She paused. "But I was sick for 2 years. And when I finally recovered, he'd met your mother. I told him to be happy. I meant it." "Did you ever get to Paris?" "No." Margaret smiled sadly. "I married a good man, had a good life. But Paris stayed a dream." Emma found her father's old photo albums that night. There it was, young Robert and Margaret in front of the Eiffel Tower. Except it wasn't real. The photo was crudely constructed, cut and glued together, Margaret's head pasted onto another woman's body, the proportions all wrong. He tried to give her Paris the only way he could. 2 days later, Emma wheeled Robert into Margaret's room. She'd arranged a Via Paris experience, borrowed equipment from a tech-savvy friend. Margaret sat waiting, nervous as a teenager. "Margaret?" Robert's voice cracked with recognition. For a moment, the fog lifted completely. "Margaretchen. You wore a yellow dress the day I promised you Paris." Margaret started crying. "You remember?" "I remember everything right now. God, I remember how scared I was. How sorry I was." Emma helped them both into the VR headsets. For 15 minutes, they walked virtual Parisian streets together, Robert's hand finding Margaret's, two old friends finally keeping a 37-year-old promise. When Emma removed their headsets, both were weeping. "Thank you," Margaret whispered. "Tell him thank you." But Robert had already drifted away again, asking Emma when his mother was coming to pick him up. If you're feeling this story, hit that like button. Trust me, it gets deeper. The second promise was carved deeper than the others. Learn to play the piano for Sarah, 1992. Emma found her father's journals in the attic, pages brittle with age. Sarah was everywhere in them, her first steps, her laughter, the leukemia diagnosis that came 2 months before her 4th birthday. Robert had written about how Sarah laughed when he hummed while fixing things around the house, how she'd dance in circles begging him to hum louder, sing louder, play her a real song on a real piano. He'd bought a keyboard 3 days after her funeral. Never opened it. Hung the promise on the tree instead. Emma found a piano teacher on Craigslist. "I need to learn one song in 2 weeks." The teacher, an elderly woman named Mrs. Park, raised an eyebrow. "That's not how piano works. It has to. Please." Mrs. Park saw something in Emma's desperation. "Show me your hands." The lessons were brutal. Emma's fingers cramped, her back ached from hunching over the keys. Mrs. Park was merciless, correcting every mistake, making her play scales until her hands went numb. Again. Again. Feel the music, don't just play it. Again. Emma practiced until her fingertips bled. She practiced while her father slept, while he forgot her name, while he asked repeatedly where his wife was. The song was a Twinkle, Twinkle Little Star, simple, achingly simple, but Mrs. Park insisted she play it perfectly. "It's for a little girl," Emma explained on the last lesson. "One who never got to hear her father play." Mrs. Park's eyes softened. "Then make her hear it in heaven." Emma brought a keyboard to the cemetery on a cold Saturday morning. Sarah's grave was small, a lamb carved into the headstone. Robert stood beside Emma, confused but quiet. She set up the keyboard on a folding table, her hands shaking as they hovered over the keys. "Dad, this is for Sarah." She played. The notes tumbled out imperfectly, she rushed the third measure, fumbled a transition, but she played it through. When she finished, she looked at her father. Robert was staring at the headstone, tears streaming down his weathered face. For just a moment, clarity burned through the fog. "She would have danced," he whispered. "She would have danced in circles and begged for more." He knelt slowly, painfully, and pressed his palm against his daughter's name carved in stone. "I'm sorry I never learned. I'm sorry for so many things." Emma knelt beside him. They stayed there until the sun began to set, two people mourning a girl one never knew and one couldn't quite remember. The third promise came with a phone number scrawled on the back, "Call Michael back, 2003. Emma found the story in old emails. Michael was Robert's younger brother. Their mother died, left the house to Robert, and Michael had been furious. They'd fought viciously. Michael had called 3 months later to reconcile. Robert never called back. Emma found Michael in Oregon, running a hardware store. His voice on the phone was cautious. "Who's this?" "Robert's daughter. Emma." A long pause. "How is he?" "Dying. Not physically yet, but his mind is going. He has dementia." Michael's breath caught. I wanted to tell him I was sorry. I was angry about money, about stupid money, and I let it destroy us. I called him back. "Did he ever tell you that?" I called to say Mom would have wanted us together. He never picked up. He hung a note about it on a tree. He wanted to call you back every day for 20 years. Emma heard Michael crying on the other end. 20 years. We lost 20 years over pride. She arranged a video call. Robert sat in front of the laptop, confused by the technology. Then Michael's face appeared on screen, older, grayer, but unmistakably his brother. "Mikey." Robert's face transformed. "When did you get so old, Mikey?" Michael laughed through tears. "Look who's talking, Bobby. You look like Dad." They talked for an hour. Robert didn't remember the fight, the dementia had stolen that pain, but he remembered childhood adventures, their father's terrible jokes, how they'd built a fort in the woods and pretended to be cowboys. Michael told stories Robert couldn't recall but laughed at anyway. Emma watched her father become young again, just for those precious minutes. When the call ended, Robert turned to Emma. "That was my brother. I haven't seen him in so long." "Why haven't I seen him?" Emma couldn't answer. Over the next 3 weeks, Emma completed 12 more promises. She donated to the animal shelter Robert had promised to volunteer at. She tracked down his high school friend Tom and delivered a letter Robert had started but never sent. She finished building the tree house he'd abandoned in their backyard when Emma was 7. She remembered him starting it, remembered him giving up, never knew he'd hung his failure in a tree. Each promise revealed layers of her father she'd never known. Robert the dreamer. Robert the romantic who'd loved before her mother. Robert the brother, the friend, the man who tried and failed and tried again. He wasn't just Dad anymore. He was a complete person with a complete life of beautiful disasters. But Robert was fading faster. Some days he didn't recognize her at all. Some days he thought she was his sister, his mother, a nurse. The window of lucidity was closing, and Emma could feel it slamming shut. One promise remained. Emma had avoided it because it was highest in the tree, tied to a branch she couldn't reach without climbing. But time was running out. She dragged a ladder out, climbed carefully, branches scraping her arms. The note was newer than the others, the ink less faded, the paper not yet weathered to transparency. "Forgive myself for not being enough, 2019. 2019, the year her mother died." Emma found Robert in his room, holding a wedding photo. He looked up, and for once, he knew her. "Emma. My Emma. Dad, this note. What does it mean?" Robert's hands trembled around the frame. "I hung promises when I failed people. Every time I disappointed someone, every time I wasn't enough, I wrote it down. The tree became a monument to every way I wasn't enough." He touched his wife's face in the photo. "I promised to grow old with your mother. I promised her 50 years. She died at 43. I'm still here, and she's not. But Dad, you were there until the end. You held her hand. You didn't leave her. But I kept living, Emma. I broke my promise. I'm still here, and she's gone, and I don't even remember her face most days." His voice shattered. "I don't remember the woman I loved more than breathing. What kind of man forgets that?" Emma pulled her father close. "The kind of man who's sick. The kind of man who tried his best. The kind of man who loved so hard he can't forgive himself for being human." Drop a comment below telling me which promise hit you hardest. I need to know I'm not crying alone here. The next morning, Emma woke her father early. She led him outside to the tree, handed him garden shears. We are cutting them all down. Robert looked confused. Why? Because these don't define you. What defines you is that you tried. What defines you is that you loved so many people so fiercely that your failures haunt you. That's not weakness, Dad. That's proof you had a heart. Together, they cut down every note. Hundreds of them fluttered to the ground like snow. Emma built a fire in their old fire pit, and one by one, they fed the promises to the flames. Margaret and Paris burned. Sarah and the piano burned. Michael and the phone call burned. The treehouse, the letters, the apologies, all of it turned to ash and smoke. Robert held the last note. His own. The one about forgiveness. Emma took it gently from his hands and tore it in half. You kept this promise, Dad. You gave us the best of yourself. You gave Mom the best of yourself. It was enough. It was always enough. She placed both halves in his palm. Together, they dropped them into the fire. Robert watched the paper curl and blacken. I wish I could remember her face. Then I'll remember for both of us. I'll remember everything you can't. They stood by the fire until it died to embers, the tree finally bare, the burden finally lifted. 6 months later, Emma stood by that same tree. Robert had passed peacefully in his sleep, the dementia taking him gently in the end. The tree was budding with spring leaves, new life emerging from old wood. Emma tied a single ribbon to a low branch. Her own note read, remember him not for what he didn't do, but for who he was. Remember that trying counts. Remember that love transcends memory. 2024. She looked up through the branches at the sky, clouds moving like thoughts, like memories, like promises kept and broken and forgiven. Her father had taught her something in his unraveling, that we're all just trying our best, that failure is proof we cared enough to try, that completion isn't what makes a promise sacred. The trying is what makes it sacred. Emma walked back toward the house, leaving the tree to grow, leaving one promise where her father had left hundreds. Not a monument to failure this time, but a testament to love. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button. Share it with someone who needs to hear that being human is enough. Like this video if you believe in second chances, in forgiveness, in remembering people not for their failures but for their hearts. And comment below, tell me about a promise you wish you could keep for someone. Tell me their name. Let's remember them together. Because in the end, that's all we can do. Remember. Forgive. Try. And sometimes, when we're lucky, we get to complete one more promise before the light fades.